Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Welcome to our series, Chosen, Trusting God's Plan and Purpose for My Life. Have you ever become so bitter, so destitute, so depressed that you wanted to change your name? Well, the woman that we're going to study today lost everything. And she didn't even want people to call her by her name. She said, I don't want to be called pleasant anymore. I want to be called bitter because the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. We're going to see one of the most wonderful narratives in the whole Bible that actually helps us to interpret the rest of the Bible. And I'm very excited about today's program, and I'm very thankful that you joined us. Before we get started, I'm going to tell you the story of Jimmy. Jimmy was one of those boys that had a mom that was in and out of jail constantly. So he really almost didn't stand a chance in his childhood. So one day, his mother got out of jail and got together with another person who had a similar lifestyle. So they picked up Jimmy. He was 13 years old. They drove around the country, sleeping in a car, living from the car the whole year long. And one day they got to Florida, and they just dropped him in a bus station. They said, we can't afford you anymore. You're 13 years old. You're on your own from now on. He had a little bag with him, probably smaller than this one because, he had nothing really. So he didn't know what to do. He was so destitute. He was so, he didn't have parents, nothing to be with him and to actually support him. So he started walking. He found this man working in a garage. He was working on wood. So he said, do you have any work for me? He didn't have any money to eat. He had nothing. And the man said, yeah, let me show you how to mow the lawn, and you can do that. And, Jimmy lived off this $20 that he used to get paid once a week for a few weeks. One day, the man and his wife realized that maybe he didn't have a place to stay. So first he lied. He said, yeah, I have a place to stay, because he thought that they were going to say, we can't employ homeless kids. But then he told them his story, and they took him in. And they took his bag to a bedroom, and the bedroom was beautiful, and he had a hot shower, and he had a place to stay, and he would watch television with them in the evenings and all of that. But one day the man realized that he had not unpacked his bag. See, I don't know if it has happened to you that you have been in such a bad journey, and you get to a good place and you're just waiting for the second shoe to drop. When is this going to stop? They're going to kick me out? So he had not unpacked his bag. So after a lot of conversations, this man promised Jimmy that he was here to stay, that they were not going to kick him out, that he had found his place, that he now lived with them. And after all this time, Jimmy just started unpacking his bag for the first time in a long time. Our Heavenly Father is still trying to convince us to unpack our bags. This story is told by Max Lucado in his book, Glory Days. And it's the story of Jimmy Wayne, who eventually found a career as a songwriter and singer of country music. Many of us have not perhaps unpacked our bags. Maybe we have not understood what it means to be redeemed. Maybe we're still living as if we are in a strange land. Maybe we have not understood the assurance of salvation. Maybe we have not understood that we have a Redeemer who has done for us what nobody else could do. And it's time to unpack our bags. Today we're going to see a narrative, but before we get into it, we want to say hello to Pastor Mike Tucker.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. You know, I interviewed Jimmy Wayne on our program, Lifestyle Magazine.
No way.
Yes, I did.
Are you
So
serious?
he's a wonderful young man, and he speaks highly of the gentleman and his wife who took him in. The gentleman was retired military.
Wow.
And he said, he said, you can stay here, but I have 2 conditions, and he held up 3 fingers, and he said, I was not going to argue with him. He said, first of all, my wife goes to church, and I go with her. You need to go as well. He said, I can do that. He said, number 2, you need to get your hair cut. He said, I got my hair cut.
Well, I had no idea because I
Yeah.
didn't tell you I was going to tell his story.
No, you did not. But he's
Wow.
a marvelous young artist, and we really, Gail and
Wow,
I wanted to
that's
adopt
awesome.
him. So
another couple that
yeah.
wanted to adopt him.
we
huh?
wanted to adopt him. He's a fine young man.
It's interesting when we have had a hard time. It's hard to say, okay, I arrived somewhere, and I'm going to believe that this is true. And there's a lot of people that said, well, yeah, but maybe this is temporary. Maybe it cannot be that good. Redemption cannot be that good. It cannot be that I can celebrate the assurance of my salvation.
When I first found the gospel, I'd lived believing that I had to earn it so long that I would slip back momentarily into the old way, thinking, well, no, it can't be that good. And God kept sending me reminders,
Wow.
sometimes in the form of people who shared with me once again
What the gospel
good
really
news.
was.
It's time to unpack your bags, son, you're here.
Wow. That's how Max Lucado actually starts his chapter. He calls it Unpack Your Bags.
Unpack your bag. Yeah.
Because spiritually, many of us still are packed because we don't know, do we have to live here? Is this for good? Is this permanent? Is this not?
Is my acceptance secure or
Exactly.
is it not?
Exactly. That's the main point.
Exactly it.
We're going to see the story of a woman, actually of 2 women. We have called this program The Destitute Woman because of Naomi. Naomi was from Bethlehem, and a lot of people don't realize that the Bible has patterns geographically. A lot of things actually happen in Bethlehem. Eventually, David will be born in Bethlehem, way before Jesus is born.
Before Jesus.
So a famine comes to Bethlehem. So, by the way, I want to highly recommend this women's Bible. We have a brand new women's Bible, and actually I have some Bible studies that I did in the back of the Bible.
That's good.
Yeah. Cephalus Publishing House. We actually sell this here in the United States. It's a wonderful Bible because it has a lot of stories about women that are not very known, and they're very nicely illustrated here too. So I highly recommend it. But I want to show a map so people understand what it meant for Naomi to have to go away from Israel, to cross to the other side, and to go to Moab. So here we have this whole map, and many people are used to it because currently, right now, it's in the news all the time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to Israel in 3 weeks, and so all this is becoming very real to me more and more and more. This is the area where everything happens in the southern part of Israel. They had to go to the other side. This is where Moab is.
Right.
So they had to leave their culture, not only their land, but their culture, and their God wasn't worshipped over here. So there were a lot of things. So the famine has to be really life-threatening when we start on the book of Ruth for Naomi and her husband and the 2 children to decide, we have to go eat somewhere.
It's also difficult for us to imagine the severity of famine in those days. I mean, famine was the thing you feared.
Exactly.
Because, it didn't matter how much money you had. If there's no food, you're not eating.
Yeah, exactly.
And families would
Because you couldn't
band
find
together
it.
or
Exactly.
do anything to survive.
Absolutely. So we get one of those famines on the first 2 verses of this book of Ruth. As I said before, the principle that we learn in this book helps us to interpret the rest of the Bible. So it's a very important principle and a very important topic. So let's get started reading the first 2 verses of the book of Ruth.
Now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem with Judah went to sojourn to the land of Moab with his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. Thank you. And the name of his wife Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephraimites of Bethlehem in Judah.
Yeah, so they were all from Bethlehem, from where eventually David and eventually Jesus will come from. And they went to Moab. They're foreigners. They're in a strange land. And if it wasn't bad enough, I don't know if it has happened to you, something like Murphy's Law. What else could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Well, everything went
wrong.
You know, they didn't have food. They moved. Okay, at least we have food.
We got food.
Now, in the next 2 verses, her life is destroyed. Her world is destroyed because her husband dies. See, you have to remember at that time, a woman with no male, like whether sons or husbands or whatever, to take care of them, were nothing.
You were destitute. You had nothing because you couldn't inherit property.
Exactly.
You really had nothing. So basically, if your husband died, you've got no source of income unless you've got a son.
Yes.
All right, good. I'm covered with the son.
2 sons.
I got 2 sons. Now they're both dead.
Yeah, which is crazy. Verse 3 and 4, then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They took, 2 women. One was
2 Moabite
Orpah,
women.
and one was Ruth. And then verse 5, both children, the sons, died. So here we have a widow in a strange land, a foreigner, with 2 other younger women. The 3 of them are destitute.
Yes.
Okay, so one of them decides to go back to her family. Ruth decides to stay with Naomi.
Which is an amazing thing. Because really the path of safety for her was to go back to her
family. Exactly.
That's where things are sure.
Yes.
This woman has nothing.
Nothing.
But it tells us how attached she was to her and how responsible she felt for her.
To her
well.
mother-in-law, which is strange.
Yeah, to her mother-in-law. This is not
her mother.
Yeah, this is not her mother. And the mother-in-law jokes that we have in this country have been universal,
So
and they've been forever.
all the cultures.
Right.
And so we know this verse very well. It's chapter 1, verse 16, where Ruth says, "Don't tell me anymore to go." If you want to read it, 1:16.
Right. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people.
And your God, my God," which is a huge thing, because it was now she was going to worship Yahweh, that we used to call Jehovah before we knew better Hebrew, the God of Israel. He's going to be my God. Where you go, I'm going to go, and he's going to be my God. So they find themselves back in Bethlehem. And the people are going, "Yay, Naomi's back!" And Naomi means pleasant, or sweet.
Yeah, sweet.
And so everybody's like, "Sweet, sweet, pleasant." And look what she says to them, verse 19 and 20 of the same chapter.
19 and 20 says, "And her mother-in-law then said to her," pardon me, I'm on chapter 1.
Yeah, chapter
I just
1,
skipped
19.
over here, 19 and 20.
Yeah.
So they both went until they came to Bethlehem, and when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me."
And Mara means bitter. That's why you remember in the times of Israel, the bitter waters were Mara, right? So it says, "Don't call me sweet, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter, because I've been dealt bitterly by the Almighty."
And anyone who's had significant losses understands this. This woman lost not just her husband, but her 2 sons.
She lost everything.
Everything is gone.
Yeah.
And so you talk about a grief reaction, and bitter, yes, that's how she felt.
Exactly.
Anyone who's been through that understands this.
And in the middle of the bitterness, she discovers something. And if you are in the middle of destitution, I don't know what it means for you. You lost your job, you lost your family, you're into drugs, you're in jail. I don't know what it is. And you're feeling, hey, how am I ever going to get out of this? This book is for you, because this is a miniature story of the plan of salvation.
It is.
And we're going to learn about that in a moment. But we are all destitute. If it wasn't because we got a Redeemer, a Savior, we would all have no chance.
And isn't it wonderful that the plan of salvation is spelled out here with a destitute woman?
Yes.
The lowest of the low. She had no social standing whatsoever,
Nothing.
being a woman.
Absolutely.
And now she has no men in her life. She's lost everything.
Absolutely.
And yet this is the person God's going to use to teach us about salvation.
I love it. That's the way of God. Usually the person that you don't expect is the one that has the biggest lesson.
The outcast, the nothing.
Absolutely. So in chapter 2, they have to survive. So I brought some whatever this is here, because because I don't know what it looked like, because the way it happened, there were laws in Israel that if you had poor people, they would be able to get ears of grain after the people,
harvesters have gone through.
So I don't know exactly what it looked like, but she found a field where she could get some grain for them to eat.
Called gleaning. You come in behind the harvesters, and also you were told not to harvest all the very edge of the field.
So they left the corners, and this was part of the laws, so that the poor people could
So
eat.
people could survive.
So one day, Boaz took notice of Ruth and said to them, leave a little more for her.
Yeah.
So one day she comes back with all of this and they say,
Yeah.
hey, we got grain for the next 2 months.
Yes, that's right.
And Naomi says, well, whose field did you go to? I mean, what's happening? Is it possible that we can unpack our bags? Is it possible that there's something changing for us here? Because they're just surviving, right? And she asks, whose field is this? And she says, it's Boaz, because Ruth has no idea. She's just trying to get some food, right?
Yeah, but Naomi knows different. He's a close relative.
But Ruth doesn't even know what that means.
No, doesn't.
Because
has no idea.
these are laws of redemption of Israel.
Of Israel.
So chapter 2, verse 20 is one of those woohoo moments in the Bible where when Naomi's jumping up and down and Ruth is looking at her like I look at Mike most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what? You know, so 2:20.
Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed of the Lord, who was not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead. And again, Naomi said to her, the man is our relative. He is one of our closest relatives.
Okay,
That's significant.
Yeah, very significant. See, Ruth is still, you know, but Naomi's saying, you don't understand. We have laws of redemption in Israel. And the actual word used here for closest relative is this word in the Hebrew, goel. So, as you know, because we've done programs for many, many years, I believe that if you understand the goel concept,
You understand salvation.
you understand the whole Bible.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Goel was the closest relative, was the only one that could do 5 roles for you. If you were enslaved because you couldn't pay a debt, your goel could come and pay your price and set you free.
Right.
If you lost your land, the goel would come and pay the price and the land would go back to
Return
the
it to
region.
you.
Yeah. The goel could appear in court in your place. He would marry the widow of somebody that died without descendants, and the first son would have the name of the brother or whatever
deceased
closer.
man,
Yes.
yes.
And the fifth thing he would avenge the blood if you were killed unjustly. So the goel had this roles of taking the shame away from the family that was destitute. Now, the reason why I think this is crazy is because when God created us in his image, in Genesis 1, 26 and 27, he became our closest of kin. So this name goel
It's God.
it was the Redeemer who would come. So throughout the Old Testament, every time it talks about the Jesus who would come, it uses this word. And so in our Bibles, it's translated Redeemer, but actually the word is kinsman redeemer.
Kinsman redeemer.
Closest of kin.
He is your closest of kin, and he's going to come take away your shame. He will pay
your price, get your property back.
Deliver you from slavery, get your property back.
Being
all
caught
of
in
it.
your place. I
Everything.
get goosebumps with this
Yes.
because, see, right now, if you, for example, if you read Isaiah 43:1, do not be afraid, for I have goeled you. I have called you by name, you are mine. Now you understand all of it.
Anyone who thinks that the idea of grace and salvation is a New Testament idea
Yeah.
does not understand this concept. This is throughout Genesis to Revelation. This is what the Bible is about.
Absolutely.
This concept.
Absolutely. And the goel concept is just spills over for us to understand that the closest of kin, the Creator, is also our Redeemer. You can never set them apart.
No.
Because when he created us in his image,
Kinsman redeemer. It's the
he
same person.
committed himself to
Right.
rescuing us because he's our closest of kin. I get so excited about that. But anyways, let's continue with the story. So Naomi's going up and down, jumping up and down. He is our goel. He's our goel. And Ruth says, what does that mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And she says, trust me. You know, we are saved. We
Yes.
can unpack our bags. We have a Redeemer.
This man is going to stand good for what he's supposed to do. He's going to take care of us.
So then she says, you have to go talk to him. And she says, and what do I do? Well, you wait till this man is asleep. And we're going to take it from the Bible so that you believe us. Chapter 3, verse 6. Ruth does what Naomi says.
So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. She came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down.
So she did something very unusual. I'm
Yeah.
sure that as a Moabite, she's like, what am I doing?
This is crazy.
This is crazy.
I'm going to get thrown out of here.
Exactly.
I'm
That's
gonna
right.
get
What am I
stoned.
doing?
don't know
Yeah.
what this is.
But Naomi had told her what to say, not only what to do, but what to say. So Ruth came with a little with a little request. And it was not a little request.
Now, this is big.
It was a big request. See, Ruth doesn't fully understand the goel redemption laws because she's not from Israel, but Naomi does.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what happens. Verse 8, it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled, you think?
Yeah.
I mean, if you woke up with a woman at your feet, I'm sure you would be startled too. And bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet, and he said,
"Who are you?"
Yeah, that was a good question, right?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative."
Okay, so here we have.
By this time, he already knows the relationship.
Yes.
He's asked about her. So
Exactly.
he knows who she is.
So she said, "Cover me," which is very important because in the Bible, the covering is a topic that goes from Genesis to Revelation. See, in Genesis, when God creates us in his image, he gives us his covering, which we lose in Genesis 3 when we sin and decide that we know better. So the whole Bible is a clothing crisis. Which covering are you going to use? The fig leaves that you're trying to make and you think they look good, or you're going to go back to God and said, "Cover me because you're my goel. You're the only one that could take the shame away." And this topic goes from Genesis literally to Revelation, because in Revelation there's still a church that thinks that they look good, and God is saying, "Hey, ask me to clothe you."
Yeah, please, because you're wearing rags right now. And it's not looking good.
Yes, you're naked, miserable, wretched. Those are the words
exact
of
words, yes.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting topic.
It's interesting that Adam and Eve clothed in light. And they thought that that's not good enough. So fig leaves they go.
Yeah.
But the whole process of Scripture is entering back into a relationship where we are now clothed or covered.
Cover me because you are my kinsman redeemer. You are my goel. You are the only one that can pay my price. You see, all the roles that Jesus does eventually at the cross, he pays our price. He gets our property back. That's why the new earth will be here.
Our inheritance.
Right? He appears in court instead of us. He buys descendants for God from a race that was dead. This is why Isaiah 53 says he will see his descendants and be satisfied, because we're talking about a race that was dead because of sin. And then he avenges our blood at the end of times. And every time that I talk about this topic, I'm going, I can't believe I didn't know it before, because I probably spent 2 or 3 decades of my life reading the Bible, not understanding the goel, kinsman redeemer concept, which is the one that made me unpack my bags.
Yeah.
Before that, I didn't understand it. So we have a redeemer. Boaz marries Ruth, covers her in the sense that taking the shame away, they become husband and wife. And guess what happens next? Verse 13 of chapter 4, thus is not only financial. Now we get more.
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son.
I love verse 14. Look at verse 14.
Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today."
Oh, I love that. That's the goel.
And may
All of
his
it is
name become famous in Israel.
And the baby's name, if you continue reading, was Obed. And Obed was the grandfather of King David. And that's how Ruth makes it to the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1.
That's right.
Because Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David, who eventually Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah. And all of it happens in Bethlehem too, like in this book. See, I think understanding the goel concept is probably one of the most important theological themes to understand why is it you can unpack your bags. Because if not, you're going to live your life.
And doubt, fear, uncertainty.
Is this temporary? It cannot be that good, et cetera, et cetera, And before I go back to the cross, I want to talk a little bit more about this covering. So I'm going to move the sheaves over there.
All right.
Is that okay?
Right. I'll take care of the sheaves.
Okay. Revelation keeps going with this topic. Chapter 3 is Laodicea, who they think that well-dressed, and God says, "Hey, buy from me the covering, the white robes, because you're not well-dressed." But when we get to chapter 7, the apocalyptic genre is very interesting, and I'm going to stand up to do this because it's hard to do it for me sitting down. Apocalyptic genre is symbolic in colors and numbers. It was a very known genre at the time of the first century. But it's so colorful. And one of the things is, how do we get the white covering that we lost at the beginning in Genesis? And I just love that. So chapter 7 of Revelation, in verse 13, there's a vision. You want to read verse 13 and 14?
Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, these are clothed in the white robes. Who are they, and where they come from? And I said to him, my Lord, you know. And he said to me, these are the ones who have come out of great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.
I absolutely love that, because, see, like I said, Revelation is very rich in symbols, in colors, in numbers. So imagine this. This is our sinful, filthy rags that the Bible talks about. Even our own righteousness is filthy rags. So how do we ever get that covering that is white? Now, if you ever want to get something white, don't put it in red.
No.
Because it's not going to come out white, except in Revelation. So in Revelation, the heavenly bleach, which is the blood of the Lamb, is the only thing that can make something black
become white.
Become white. I just love it. I just love it, because this whole topic of covering goes like that. So here the angel is explaining, these people have put their robes, and they have washed them, and washed them in red, in the blood of the Lamb. And guess what? Once you do that, they will come out white. And it's the symbol is so rich. The way that you get your robe white,
it's the blood of the Lamb.
It's the blood of the Lamb. Isn't that an amazing concept?
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for being with us, Mike. I'm going to head back to the cross.
Very good. Good place to go.
Yes, and I'm covered. You know, if you have been one of those people that have not unpacked your bags because you're not sure salvation is that good, I want to say the same thing that they told Naomi in chapter 4, verse 15. Blessed are you, because you have not been left without a goel. You have a goel. You have a redeemer. You have somebody that said, hey, come over here. You're my closest of kin. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to pay your price. I'm going to get your land back. I'm going to appear in court instead of you. And I'm going to take care of the whole thing. I'm even going to avenge your blood. So relax. Rest, breathe, and unpack your bags. So the goel for me, you know why Jesus on Luke chapter 23, verses 33 to 43, was able to promise the thief on the cross paradise? See, paradise, the same word, is what we had lost in Genesis 3 when we sinned. We lost our covering and we lost our land. And we lost the tree of life, the symbol of eternity, of the connection with the life giver. But at that moment when Jesus is dying on the cross, he promises the thief on the cross that he will be in paradise. Because at that moment, the goel is opening the path back to paradise, to our land. So you have been blessed because you have not been left without a redeemer. You have a covering, and you have a goel. Don't be afraid. He has goeled you.